Hello, Jörg here, the COACHpreneur Journey podcast. Today, the first time in a studio. Let's see how that goes. The COACHpreneur Journey podcast is all about coaching. We talk with coaches, introduce coach profiles. We talk with coach entrepreneurs about their entrepreneurial journey. Of course, we talk with clients. And we also talk with providers for the coaching ecosystem. Today I am with Richard Ferryanto, a former executive, now coach with a very special focus. Richard also lives here in Jakarta. But Richard, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jörg. It's great to be here, and it's great to be in this podcast as well. Great to be sharing this room on the first time live podcast with you face to face. Anyway, I've come from 23 years of corporate experience being an executive in a various role. And my last role before I left it was a CEO of a company. And since about 12 months ago, I basically deepened my passion in coaching and in developing people as well. So I took the coaching certification. And what I've encountered during this brief journey as well as start of my coaching is I was able to basically combine my corporate experience as well as my life experience and training and coaching experience dealing with people in this corporate life, also with the game that I love, which is golf. And now I'm basically quite privileged to be able to coach various people from executive, emerging leaders, professional athletes as well. And here's what's interesting, because these two areas seems to converge somewhere and they have some similarities.
Yeah, before we go into the coaching realm, you just mentioned briefly that you had a corporate career up to CEO level. Is there anything you want to share about your person, what you like besides playing golf apparently? Anything?
I like traveling. And my whole 23 years of experience has been spending a lot of time with distributor. And as in the industry I was in, life insurance, it's a business about people, because you meet people, you meet agent, you meet business partner as well, who basically has a different objective. And your key job is basically to make them successful before you and the company can be successful, because the success of this insurance company relies heavily on distribution, one of them. That's where I basically take a lot of interest in developing people, as well as finding a moment where they can also basically grow and find their own breakthrough.
Yeah, so meaning we share a little bit of a background, right? So I was also working in the insurance industry. So the challenge I've always observed in distribution was that you always bring in new agents or new people.
Yeah.
You need to keep them motivated. But of course, there is a high focus on performance, so to say. What always comes to mind when we talk about performance, to me, is sustainability. And then I love to look at sports analogies because it helps people to understand what game or what business we are in and how to make it sustainable for us. What's your observation when we look at distribution? What kind of game in a sports analogy is that?
It basically converts somewhere when you do sport and when you try to perform in a distribution area in whatever business it is, whether it's a manufacturing business, is a digital business, or it's in the life insurance business. That takes like somebody to basically become technically sound, or you need to become technically good at it before you can perform and then deliver. And also at the same time as well, you have to have the right kind of a mindset. Because along the way, similar to achieving something in sport and achieving some or selling a life insurance policy to a customer, which is one of the probably most challenging product to sell, you need to have a right mindset as well. And here is where mindset is basically one of the key part, that you need to basically win first before you win in a real battle. Like an athlete, after all the preparations, after all the training, if you have the right mindset, then you are a lot more likely to win than having the right capability and techniques with a not ready mindset when you go into the battle. I think the same goes for any other career, for distributor as well, before they meet the first customer.
So what is the challenge as a leader to create this environment with the right mindset?
I think the leader is playing a key part here to enable this performer to be able to perform, to be able to deliver. Number one is to allow them to discover what actually clicks for them before they're performing. For example, performing or selling to a big client or delivering a stellar performance on the court for a tennis player or maybe on the course for a golf player. You need to basically do a couple of things. It's physical and mental. Number one is about your physical reset. Before we come to a high pressure moment, usually there's a lot of temptation for you to overthink, to memorize, just like a student before coming to a high pressure moment of a final test. What you will do is basically you will try to refresh yourself with all the things that you know, but what you don't realize is that it will quietly stress yourself out as well. So the simplest first thing that you need to do before a high stake moment is a physical reset. So the physical reset would involve checking all the signs of your physics, whether there is a tension or not. The simplest way is breathing. So breathing will help you to ease up the tension. And also, it calms the nervous system. And at the same time, it also makes you not to overthink about what you have learned, because what you have learned is actually already ingrained in you. Number two is to focus on an external anchor, not towards yourself, not to say that do not mess this up, but really focus on the external anchor. For example, if you're facing a client meeting, then your external anchor should be the client. If you're basically about to hit a golf ball, then choose a single point of target on the course. Or even the tennis player, you gotta choose a spot where you're gonna hit the ball to. So that single external anchor is actually the exact mechanism before you reach the flow. Most of the people will do the opposite under that pressure. Most of the people will turn inward just to tell themselves, oh, don't mess this up, or please do it right. But when they do that, that basically will interfere with the skill that they already possess. So physical reset, second is the external anchor. And I think the third one is about getting a trigger, getting the trigger that you commit. So this trigger will actually bridge you from deciding to do it and actually doing it.
Interesting perspective. I'm just smiling because when you were saying, okay, physical reset, I was wondering what is the after physical reset, and then you mentioned breathing. And then I realized I'm not breathing because, to be honest, right, so the whole setup here makes me a little bit uncomfortable, or not uncomfortable, it's new, right? And that's why I'm not in my comfort zone, and I'm realizing, okay, the AC is off and it's getting a bit warm because of all the lights, right? But when you mentioned that breathing, I thought, oh yeah, breathing, right? So I normally do that. So I was starting to breathe consciously, and that helped me to relax. And it's such a simple thing, right? But so many people don't do that. So I think in the sports world, people are maybe more conscious about breathing, especially when you do certain sports, because it's part of what you have been trained to do. What comes to mind is, for example, yoga and Pilates, which is naturally about breathing. I'm an endurance athlete, so when I do my ultra trails or when I do my bicycle races, I'm always conscious about my breathing, because basically without the oxygen, I just get past the point of sustainability. But what comes to mind is that in the business world, breathing and the focus on breathing doesn't necessarily exist.
So the physical reset actually goes more than breathing. Breathing actually a lot more relevant to sport. It's a lot more relevant to calming your nerves. In the game I play golf, say you just score a bad, you just had a bad score on one hole, and I think between that hole into the next one, there's an opportunity for you to calm down your nerve system, because people tend to get angry, people tend to get really upset or really obsessed with the past failure, and then it drags them into like a downward spiral performance afterwards because they can't get over it. So breathing is one of the methods. That's in sport, I would agree. But in an executive world, in a corporate world, a physical reset can also be done through other means. For example, if you notice that people would be chewing gum, people would be like walking around the office just to relax themselves, that's one of the form of your physical reset. I would say it's like it's a pre-big moment routine you do. When I was a CEO, before my board meeting, I would basically choose to be in my room, sit, and then just review my notes and then drink water. And then I walk myself slowly into the meeting room, greet everyone. That's like the reset you need, because then unconsciously, basically, you don't think inward. It brings yourself towards your audience, or towards the anchor, which is the second point as well. And everything will just flow after that.
What you have been using or practicing as a leader is also applicable in sports. And how did you come up with the connection of, oh, now I'm becoming a coach, or I'm in a coach education, and versus, rather than just focusing on the obvious, maybe the leadership space, because that's where you have your experience, getting into the sports realm and coaching golf athletes, among others?
I think naturally, because I was on both sides of the equations. I've been an executive, and I played weekend golf as well. And at sometimes it's a competition, a performance sport. What's identical between the two is the nervous system itself. People can get nervous, both being an executive or being in any role in a corporate world. What's inevitable is basically you'll get challenge, you'll get pressure, right? The same with sport. Once you reach a certain milestone, I think the aspiration for every sportsman would be to do more, and that could create a pressure itself. And what is similar, say a CEO before making a difficult decisions, or a sportsman, say a tennis player is facing a match point on a big championship, it's the same narrowing of attention, that your attention really zoom in into certain topics, but also at the same time, your nerve will tempt you to overthink, will tempt you to basically call out everything that you already know of, or all the knowledge that you have, or all the training that you have done before, because of that narrowing of focus, right? And that could actually undo the intent of being able to perform. And like what you said about being present in the moment, it's basically not doing that, but it's about recognizing the feeling that you encounter in that particular moment. Not try to overcome it, but it's just saying, okay, I'm nervous right now. So being able to recognize that, it actually matters a lot in both aspects, being in a corporate world, being in front of a big client, or facing your opponent on the sports arena. both matters about being present. I think similar to the game of golf as well, the next shot is basically the most important one. Not the one after next, but not the one before that probably you hit well or not well.
Yeah, so the interesting question is always, how is having emotions impacting your behavior, right? And in which way? So holding back or going for it. If I just put up these two. When it comes to performance coaching or when you coach golf players, what is your approach when you work with them? Are you helping them to execute a swing, or is it different things what you're doing? Because coaching so has many different understandings. So I'm assuming you are not the sports coach, so to say, right? You don't make somebody getting better at how to maybe hold the what is it, the club, and
the club. Yeah.
How to position your feet. So that's not what you are doing. So how do you help golf players to perform better or play better?
I'm not a swing coach. I'm not a certified technical coach for the golf. I think I've been fortunate to have played the game for 15 years, to really experience the game, to also watch the game and on the TV, the world competition where world-class players are playing, and also do a lot of readings as well about how what people say is a mindset sport. It's a sport that messes up with your mind, that has a lot to do with how you think, comes into play, and then experiencing it myself. So when I coach a golfer, so it's less about technical, it's less about how he hits the ball, how he basically grab the club and swing the club. But it's more about how he thinks about the game, how he thinks about the progress, or maybe the dip in the performance as well. So let me give you one example. So when I work with an athlete that was about to head into a tournament, because the tournament for the athlete usually start at a Q1, first quarter of the year, after an off season. Any other golf, a professional athlete will be technically very capable because they're well trained. They have gone to many coaches, right? Not only golf, but tennis. You go to every coaches possible to get the best capability to perform, to do a forehand or even a swing on a golf, or even how you jump start on an athletic field. But a lot of the time, when you get these things, you also realize that you're stuck. Most of the athlete will feel, hey, I've been training hard, like 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm technically capable. My body is ready as well. There's no injury, but I'm still stuck with performing or delivering at a real competition. So what was actually happening is actually how he sees the result, right? The question I often ask is that if you get a bad result, do you actually allow that result or that failure to define you? And what do you do next after some failure or some bad result where you don't mean it, where you don't win in a competition? And a lot of the athletes I encounter through some conversations, they would just go back to the training ground. They would just go back to the swing coach. They would just go back to their gym, fixing the techniques, pumping more weight, right? So a lot of the obsessions are actually more on the technical side, or working harder, hitting more balls, pumping more weight, build more muscle, build more flexibility, just to improve on your technical capability. And that's where when I conversed with that athlete, I said, if I offer you one thing and you're open to try, Would you be willing to learn? Would you be willing to listen? So what's that? I said, unlearning. So it's unlearning about it's not about the swing thought, but more about like a habit or belief that has been built in the game that the performance is not allowed to define me. And under the unlearning as well, it needs to come with some understanding that when he realized that he could unlearn, would he also realize that it will not immediately make him better? Will also he realize that when you're unlearning, you're a lot more vulnerable on the next competition? And it did. The next competition, when starting to unlearn things, starting to unlearn some old habits and try to be a lot more flowy in your game, there is another dip in the performance. There is another dip in the performance. But the next competition is where the real learning happening. That's how basically the golfer discover himself in the most vulnerable moment. And that's the moment I actually pointed back that the rough result shouldn't be defining him or defining the athlete, but the bad result is just a data point. It's not a failure, it's just a data point. It's just a reference of where he is. And I think after that, what changed is actually a specific shift in the way he thinks, the way the athlete thinks, that he approached the similar pressure moment, that he also understands that being able to master something is not instant. The understanding also that whenever you unlearn things, your progress is not going to be always linear. It's always up and down. And at the end of the day, that also brings the athlete to be a lot more process oriented rather than result focused.
Yeah, you mentioned so many interesting aspects. So one of the questions which I have on my website and in a lot of conversations is, what if doing more isn't the answer, but becoming more is? And it's so natural, so also you shared that, right? That we double down on what we think we need to do, on what we have been doing. So we go more into the gym, we do more hits, we do more hours, right? In the office we do more hours, we maybe take more control, we consider control, but then basically we do micromanaging our teams. Yeah. So doing more. And that's not sustainable, right? Because how much more can you do? How much more weight can you push? How much more hours can you practice? How much more hours can you work? So it's becoming, so some maybe say smarter, I say becoming more. And unlearning is definitely one step to realize, okay, that's I have been doing and that has served me, but now it's time to let go of that and find something else. And the other aspect which you mentioned, which is kind of common knowledge, everybody knows that when you do something new, it will slow you down, you will make mistakes, you don't get the results like before, but you are doing it differently because you believe it's a long-term or medium-term advantage, right? So basically it will bring you to a different level once you master that new aspect. And the third thing you mentioned is that, what was the third thing? What was the third thing you mentioned? I forgot. But that's the beauty with editing, right? So we can just edit
Yeah.
out. So it was the doing more, it was the unlearning, and then you said is a long term.
That the instant, that the progress is never linear.
Yeah. And the third thing you said is about the process, right? It's not about the things you do, it's about the process, and it's a journey. And in our performance-oriented world, where everything is about performance, and where the news is all about the high performers or the celebrities or the top players, right? On Instagram, all the successful looking or happy looking people. It creates this pressure that we need to be the same, right? That we always achieve. And admitting that it takes time, and okay, this time wasn't what I expected, but at least, or it didn't even go terribly wrong. So how can we learn from that, right? So I'm assuming that as a coach, you are supporting your clients on this mindset shift towards learning and the journey or process versus the other aspects you mentioned, right? Doing more and tougher. So because you mentioned before the physical reset and also the mindset, being in the right mindset, how do you incorporate that in your coaching, both maybe on the corporate side as well as on the sports side?
It's actually through lots of conversations. Of course, when I do the coaching to a corporate person, it's actually a lot easier to relate because I've been there, done that. So anything that happens, whether it's a working environment or some high target of performance, so I would be able to pick up the nuance and I think raise some right question as well. But when I integrate that with the athlete, York, I think it's about being present. It's about noticing some physical cue when somebody is basically tired, when someone is stressed out there, body language, whether that particular player is forgetting his or her routine, rushing when walking. That's not even like lashing out to other, but even like when you rush, when you start forgetting your routine, you're basically out of your own bubble. So when you're out of your own bubble, that's where you're prone to distractions, right? And of course, observing that, then we'll take it back into the regular conversation. So my job was basically to bring up all those observations, because that could be the blind spot of that person. When you're in the game, you might not realize that you're walking too fast or you're forgetting things, and suddenly there is a dip, right? What they focus on is actually on the dip. So what I did was basically bring that into realization, call that out. Did you remember that you usually will do this routine before you hit the shot? Or you usually will bounce the ball a couple of times before you do the serve in tennis, but you seem to be forgetting it. What happened in there? So I think that takes a bit of a exercise as well for the player to be mindful about how he feels or how she feels during the game. So playing that back will create more opportunity for the player to reflect. And certainly after the game, that's a big opportunity for the player to reflect. I also remember that guiding a young player, a young athlete is somewhat quite unique as well, because any sport, especially golf, can basically reveal your true character, or even the relationship as well that you have with people around you, people that are close to you. One of the exercises is not swing, but it's not about understanding how long the course is, but it's about calling out every day the things that you're grateful about. Because what that young golfer saw was more of a, I can't hit the shot, I suck at this game, I don't think I'm good. But there's some other things that when she shifts her perspective, a lot of beautiful things that she could find. So listing that down is actually one of the, I would say, exercise to be grateful and to notice some of the things that works in her journey.
We always tend to focus on what's not working versus how far we have already come. Right?
Yeah.
So
as simple as I can be here on the course. It's a beautiful course, sunny, the sun is beautiful. That's one thing to be thankful about.
So what I wanted to get to is what you were sharing is the aspect of being present and then playing back in a way of question to create some awareness what happened, right? So example, when you did this swing or before you did this swing, I had the impression there was something on your mind. And so I want to call it out for our audience because it's maybe not obvious or well understood by many how our brain is wired. So when you do a golf swing, you don't think about that, right? So when you swing, it's motor memory. So basically, because you have trained that so many times, you don't think about it. And that's true for everything which we do, which we are expert in, which requires to work with our body, even when we do tasks with our brain, right? So what we have been doing many times, it's on autopilot. So we just execute without thinking. The problem is that when we are distracted by a thought, by a feeling, by maybe an emotion, so frustration, what happened with the last swing or with the last stroke or with the last meeting, right? It puts the brain out of autopilot, and then we are starting to think about, okay, is my foot right? Is my shoulder right? Is my whatever, right? So we basically recap and check all the things in order to make sure that we execute the perfect swing. Yeah. And then while we are swinging, our brains tries to stay in control and help us to do the better swing. And then we don't do the perfect swing because it's split second, right? So, yeah. And our brain interferes. So that's why it's so important to be present, right? In a way that it doesn't interfere with the automatic execution, and trust the process, so to say, or trust the training we have or the training hours we have put in. And for me, I can relate to that to snowboarding. One day I got out of the house and then it looked like fresh snow, but I was nervous about visibility and stuff. So I was always having in the back of my mind, don't fall. And sure thing, I fell, right? And sure thing, I cracked the rib because I was not going naturally. I was super cautious, and then, I didn't have the speed to just go over it, and then, I hurt myself. How do your clients, on both sides, right? So the business side as well as maybe the sports side, react to the awareness that getting out of their mind, doing the physical reset, the emotional reset, actually improves their game or performance? Do you have any concrete examples?
It wouldn't necessarily or immediately improve their performance, but it actually improved their belief that whatever they do, those hours of training plus the mindset reset, is a new emanation for them. Because what happened before is basically the past failure is always a failure, but now it's more like it's a process. It's not a detour from your progress, but it's a process itself, right? And understanding that whenever you learn a new skill, whenever you unlearn things and learn a new things, there's always times that you need to integrate that into your muscle memory. When you basically do one thing wrong and then you try to do it right with the new motions, that takes a lot of time, that takes a lot of training and belief as well to wire that so the next time you do it you wouldn't have to think about it. So that understanding that nuance, that you need time to integrate, and whatever setback you have is not a detour, is one important skill. Because I think when, especially in the world, right, be it a corporate or a athlete world, we have expectation on ourselves, and we have people expectation as well on us performing. And especially the external expectation would easily tempt us to forget that, okay, let's forget all those mindset thing, let's forget all those things, just focus on getting the result. That's a big temptation because there's people to please. But you talked about earlier about sustaining performance, about sustaining your progress, right? That awareness is very important.
Yeah, and also the understanding that performance is not a constant, and as well as energy, right? So meaning we don't have the same energy every day, we don't have the same motivation every day, we don't have the same self-confidence every day. And I think a very interesting aspect is the external factors, so expectations of others. So in the business side, we talk about KPIs and targets, right? And that's a hard set expectations. And that can be really, it can put up really a lot of pressure. And the same thing is in sports, right? So meaning if maybe you have the spectators and you find, right, today is maybe not resonating with you, so there's no connection. Or you have a sponsor who's expecting something, or you have or maybe the coach, the sports coach or your manager is interfering here. And just putting it aside, in the moment you are performing, so you're doing things, is really a challenge, right? Yeah. And I think that's where coaching helps to shift that perspective from what is obvious to us to what is maybe more subconscious, where we have our blind spots, where we don't realize how life and expectations and maybe our beliefs, you mentioned beliefs, are impacting us. So Richard, while we have been talking a lot about aspects of coaching and how you coach and how it works in the sports world and how the relation is to the executive, to your past experience, and in the office world, in the executive world, and in the corporate world, and working with leaders and working as a leader. So who are your clients now, and what are their concerns or maybe circumstances they are facing?
So I have a range of clients. So like what I said earlier, so I work with the executive, couple of emerging leaders, so the young leaders who basically rise up. I also coach some of the sales manager from life insurance agency distributions in individual and group setup, and also athletes. Most of the concern for the people in the corporate world is about managing the workplace environment. One client also wanting to basically understand a lot more about or sharpen the emotional intelligence in terms of dealing with some interpersonal stuff at work. One guy also works on continually on his own identity and purpose, whether that actually aligns with whatever he does and the role he's in as well. So it's about finding that balance and alignment. And of course, with the athlete that we talked about, it's about building the right kind of a mindset ahead of the competition or as you approach some high-stake moments in the game.
I'm curious, identity and emotional intelligence. So can you elaborate a little bit more about these aspects?
Yeah, identity is where the person declare at the beginning, this is what my purpose is. And throughout the interaction, we start identifying or discovering the surrounding he is in, the office setup, the role he's in, the way he interacts, the snap judgment he makes as well, the way he reacts to positive thing or negative things, and like roll that back into the purpose. And I think that the realization came when there are a couple of reactions that went on an autopilot, which basically ingrained in him that he would need to unlearn because that basically not allowing him to stay true to himself. So those realization and awareness was part of the journey. And when we talk about the emotional intelligence, it's about recognizing emotions of the client itself and recognizing the emotion of the people around, the executive, the co-workers, the teams as well, and also understanding the concept of like action and intentions. So that's part of the learning about being emotionally capable when it comes to interpersonal skill.
Yeah, emotional intelligence is unfortunately underrated in office space in my experience. So I'm doing a lot of conflict management workshops as well as working with tension in organizations, and so many participants in these workshops always say, no, we don't need emotions in the office, we need to be rational, right? So emotions is for your personal life. Yet, when it comes to high-stake situations, as you mentioned, it's always the emotions which get into the way. So we cannot put them aside because we are humans and they are impacting us, as we discussed, right? So when you do the swing, you're having a bad thought, it impacts how you swing, and that's also how you have the conversation, how you behave as a leader in a meeting and then or in interactions with your teams. And that, of course, then creates a dynamic which you might not want to have, right? Because it's not contributing to...
And similar also to the executive, right? If golf swing cannot be undone, as an executive, if you let the emotion takes control and then you made the wrong decision or you don't say the right things, it also cannot be undone sometime to your coworkers, to your team, or even the decision you make for the team and the company.
Yeah. And it creates beliefs, right? And that then shapes behavior, and it has a whole series of events. I want to come back to the identity part because I am assuming that's also a very crucial aspect of your young professional. So you mentioned the young professional golf player you are coaching, because especially for people who are young, right? They might not know what their identity is, and there is a lot of external factors maybe trying to shape their identity.
Yep.
Has that been a topic in your coaching with this young professional, or is it something?
To some extent, yes. I think it starts with something simple. It starts with something simple. It starts with gratefulness, and then it starts with some positive talk about on herself as well, before we go into a deeper topic like identity. Because as they grow up in the game as well, they need to enjoy the game. They would want to compete as well. So I think taking one step at a time, as long as they really grasp it, the concept, and also start applying it, that's a big progress before we move into the next things on identity.
Yeah, because as you put it before, you said it in a side sentence, is that when you're not aligned, with your identity, so basically how you behave or how you're forced to behave versus how you basically feel who you are. It causes a lot of stress
and talking about the coaching on the identity to the youngster as well, especially teenager, we also need to be cognizant that the parent, who is actually a big part of their world, should also take part, be it as a thinking partner of the coach or also the client of the coach. Because golf course is only 4 hours out of the 24 hours, the remaining is with friends, and the rest is with the parents as well. So any influencing surrounding would have to be taken into account in that sense.
It's a very important aspect and strong statement. I cannot stress it more. And so that's why when I coach teams, the leader is always included. So when somebody says, hey, coach my team, I say, okay, I coach your team, but you also need to be coached.
Yeah.
So
how the team behaves is to some extent a reflection of the leader as well.
Yeah, and it's an interesting aspect. Richard, where can people find you?
People can find me. So I have the social media. I have my contact number as well, which I'll make available to you. So we can start with a simple conversation and we'll see how that basically will take us.
Okay, yeah, so we are going to share his LinkedIn and Instagram or whatever there is in the show notes. Is there anything we have not touched on yet, which you would like to bring in and have a conversation about now?
I think that's good for now.
Okay. And Richard, thank you very much for being here and being my guinea pig in the real setup, so not just online recording. It was a pleasure having you. I enjoyed the conversation. I wish you all the best for your professional and personal life. And I'm curious how it goes with your coaching. So how much of that will be in the corporate world and how much of that will be transition into the athletes world, because I think the corporate world, there are more coaches taking care of that, but on the athlete side, I think it's really powerful. Thank you for doing that work. Yeah, and all the best. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.